From beautiful frozen Lake Tahoe, join Bob Hope and his guests in a celebration of comedy and oil through a handful of skits and half a dozen songs. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about a Bob Hope special.
We sure are. I think a pretty representative Bob Hope special, too.
You've been watching a bunch of these, right?
I have, and I've been watching and reading about Bob Hope. Bob Hope, to me, is one of the quintessential entertainers, represents so much of old school showbiz, and I think a lot of what we talk about. So I've always been interested in him, and I really like the idea of doing one of his specials here. Before we really get going, Mike, I want to give a quick shout out to our friend Gino Cuddy, who had asked that we do a different Bob Hope special. I'm not going to mention it right now because I think it's something that we could do somewhere down the road. It's differently formatted and it involves a lot of favorites of us of the podcast. So we're not doing it this season, but thanks, Gino, for getting kind of Bob Hope in our minds. But for this one, we want to do one that's more of like a classic Bob Hope with a monologue, with certain types of guest stars, musical performances, etc. But thanks, Gino, for continuing to listen to and support the show, and hopefully we'll get to that at some point.
Thank you, Gino. And I know certainly in the 80s I watched a lot of Bob Hope specials.
Yeah, he was very popular up in the 80s and into the early 90s. Still was kind of a presence on NBC.
Yeah, and I mean, I forgot, but I was looking up his age again, and so we're doing a special from 1977, and so he was almost 74 years old when he did this.
Right.
It was kind of amazing, really. And I forgot he lived till he was 100, and was probably doing specials at least until he was 90, right?
Correct. And probably long past the point he should have been doing them. Definitely into the 90s. And I was telling you that even just several years after this special, I think he was showing, some signs of aging after kind of seeing almost timeless for a while. I mean, graying of the temples, maybe getting a little paunchier, but still seeming like kind of the sharp, quick-witted Bob Hope. But I think as time went on, became almost more of a caricature because of the aging and the cue cards and some things we'll get into. But even at this time, he was still a very, very popular and big star for NBC, which, as we've talked about on numerous occasions, late 70s, early 80s, not a golden era for NBC. So they really needed and relied on Bob Hope to give them ratings. And he was on an awful lot in this time period. And most of the time, he was pretty successful.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting. Like, what point did he stop sort of being a movie presence?
Into the 60s, he was still making movies. And by the one we're going to talk about, Bob Hope's All-Star Comedy Spectacular from Lake Tahoe. And this was January 1977. By this point, he had long been out of the movie game. I think he had a movie like in the early 70s that tanked pretty much, I think around 72, 73. And I was just reading, I think that like one of the things he really liked to do in his specials was promote his current movie projects. And I think this movie, I can't remember the name of it right now, but when that came out, I don't even think he promoted it on his special. And then he was pretty much just in cameos and things like that. So he was a movie star into the 60s, but not nearly the box office attraction he was like in the 1940s and even into the 1950s.
Okay. I don't think I was aware when watching him on TV for a while that he had even been a movie star.
And I think that's understandable, yeah.
He was that guy on TV, and I mean, he was in the Muppet movie, but I can't think of much else.
I mean, he started out in vaudeville and was big on radio for years. Was huge in films, and then became one of the faces of NBC and a big television presence and in commercials, things like that. So one of the interesting things I read, and let me give credit actually, Wesley Hyatt wrote a book called Bob Hope on TV, which is a critical assessment of all of the TV appearances he could find. Not just the specials, but appearances on other programs, guest shots, appearances on game shows, talk shows, etc. And another really excellent book called The Laugh Makers by Bob Mills, who started out as a lawyer and became one of Bob Hope's writers. So you get two different perspectives. And the Mills book, really, he wrote, I think, maybe like 6 or 7 years with Bob Hope, and kind of like the later era, but gives a lot of insight into what he saw about Hope and Hope's career. And he said something interesting in the book. He said Bob Hope would tell you that his main job was as a live performer. So he saw his main job as making people laugh by going around doing live performances. So as a result, the specials often took a back seat, and everybody else might be rehearsing while he might be delayed because he'd be making a gig somewhere. So if you asked him, his take was he would consider himself mostly a live performer. So you'd see like the Christmas specials, which many people know him for. He would do like a studio-based Christmas special, but also many years a USO show where they would take the footage and edit together scenes from him doing live shows for soldiers. And that was probably where he felt most at home, was entertaining troops or just entertaining regular live audiences and just getting laughter that way. So that was really how he saw himself as a live performer. But he became this big television icon too for many years.
So unfortunately, I don't remember all the details of the story, but when my dad was in the Air Force and I don't know if this is when he was stationed in Saigon or stationed in Thailand, but he flew over like to land a Bob Hope performance, and Bob Hope made some sort of joke about him, and it was two planes. But and then my dad for years wanted to find that special, and he never did. I don't remember. Unfortunately, I don't remember what the joke was, but I guess it was an ad lib.
Wow,
because he probably didn't know two jets were gonna fly over. So, but my dad was kind of proud of that.
Yeah. Well, Bob Hope did seem legitimately interested in providing entertainment for the troops, and he took that role seriously. And some has been said about his possible political leanings over the years, but I think Bob Mills makes the point that he didn't really know hardly anything about politics per se. He was loyal to who he was friends with, which is maybe why he kind of ignored Watergate for the large part during the 70s. Didn't make a lot of pointed jokes about Nixon, and has a reputation now, I think, as being a Republican, maybe partly because he was associated with the military. But it seems like he was more of like just kind of an old-fashioned, patriotic, and although he was not born in America, embraced America and sort of became associated with patriotism and the better parts of it. And we get a little bit of that in this special, especially at the end of the special we're going to talk about. But to me, he's just a fascinating person. And I think, the Christmas shows is a good example. It's kind of like a tradition. It sort of became formula. But I do remember the Christmas shows, the studio ones especially, being a staple of NBC, every holiday season, and kind of like watching a little bit of those here and there.
Yeah. And then, of course, we've mentioned before our enjoyment of Dave Thomas's impression of Bob Hope on SCTV.
Yes, for sure. That's brilliant. Now, one thing I'll say, though, is a couple of years ago, a bunch of Bob Hope specials were streaming on Amazon Prime, in good quality and everything. Unfortunately, it's mostly all the USO Christmas specials, which is good. But I like, kind of like what we're going to talk about now, I'd like to see more of that. Time Life has issued some various DVD collections, but again, they seem focused on those particular specials, and I think there could be various reasons for that. I mean, it might be easier to clear music for some of it, but also, I didn't know this, but I found out that apparently Bob Hope maintained complete control over his shows and licensed them to NBC, so NBC would get the rights to show them, but would not own them. So it's probably like I think the Bob Hope estate has the control over these specials, but NBC wouldn't even get the opportunity to rerun them. Bob Hope had total say way up in probably into the late 80s on how often they would air, when they would air, what day, what time, and all that. And he could do it because he was getting some of the highest ratings. And this might be a good point to mention, Mike, that apparently Bob Hope did over 300 specials or so of his own. And that's not even counting like guest appearances, and that sounds like a staggering amount of television, like primetime specials. But if you think about it, he was doing this for, almost 40 years. And many years he would do, sometimes a couple in a month and at least like 10 a year. So it adds up pretty quickly when you look at it that way. But
10 a year. Wow.
Yeah, he was a regular part. And it actually, as time went on in the 1970s, and we're going to learn a great deal about Texaco as we talk on this special, Mike. I can talk about some of this stuff as we go along, but Texaco became his main sponsor of these specials in 1974, and they were part of why the specials actually became longer, many of them, and more often. So it kind of maybe led to a little overexposure at a time when he wasn't quite in his prime, but, they'd have more 90-minute and 2-hour specials as opposed to most of them being like 60 minutes. So there was a lot of Bob Hope, even as late as 1977 when he's, 74 going on 75. But still popular, and according to the Wesley Hyatt book, his 1970 Christmas special was, at the time, the highest rated entertainment television show ever. And I think he said that and then the follow-up in 1971 held the record until, I think it was NBC that aired Gone with the Wind, November 1976, and that broke a couple of Bob Hope specials record to become, at that time, the highest rated entertainment television program ever, which to me is pretty amazing. I kind of thought going into this, and I was thinking more of like, okay, he was an institution on NBC, but he was just kind of like filler, and they'd put him on the schedule when they needed something. But no, he was, it's probably more accurate to say he was an essential part of NBC's programming, and they would build around the Bob Hope specials.
And again, this speaks to his loyalty too. He would stick with NBC during all their ups and downs.
Right, and it's possible he just had such a good deal with them, and he would, like, little things like he had signed like a contract with them, according to the Bob Mills book, that they were responsible for like a lot of the production expenses. So he was like the executive producer of all of his specials, but he had kind of a sweetheart deal because he was committed, or they were committed to like for studio space or things like that. He would be paying like the same rates he had like years ago. So he was responsible for a lot of the budget, but he had these good deals and complete creative control, as we mentioned. And, there'd be times where like censors might say things, but ultimately if it got a laugh, it was very tough to prevent Bob Hope from doing anything he wanted. And it's just kind of another interesting thing that I learned is that Bob Hope was in control of every single aspect of most of these specials. It wasn't just him showing up from a tour and reading jokes off cue cards and then leaving. He was actually involved in the post-production, the costume design, and every aspect would have to get his approval.
And, you mentioned censors. I think there's a few, mildly risque jokes in this special.
Yeah.
Not just like a sexual innuendo kind of stuff, but his monologue includes some weed jokes.
Yeah.
That surprised me.
Yeah, and I think he sort of started maybe seeming a little bit more out of touch as they went into like the late 60s and the counterculture became a thing. So I think even then probably a lot of the jokes like about, marijuana and things like that probably seemed a little quaint. But he was also going towards an establishment audience, really like kind of quintessential middle America kind of thing. And a lot of this stuff, it would be kind of like gently introducing some of these concepts into the world of comedy without going too far. But yeah, just kind of bring into it. It does seem kind of weird because Bob Hope has this reputation, and as far as like some of the risque material, I guess off screen, Bob Hope had a bit of a reputation, but his on-screen persona was sort of like the cowardly romantic lead for many years in all those movies, who might wind up with a girl, but was far from the alpha male character that other movie stars at the time were.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the audience that you can see in this, from the South Shore room of Harrah's Lake Tahoe, they're like families with kids and things too. Kids and things. Kids. They don't have like monkeys.
Yeah.
So, like you said, kind of geared towards middle America, I guess. I assume people just visiting Lake Tahoe on their vacations there. So I can't imagine those toddlers were having a real fun time at a Bob Hope TV special, but maybe toddlers loved Dean Martin.
Yeah, or especially like a lot of the topical humor you'd think would like totally go over their heads.
Some of it went over my head.
Yeah.
There was some joke in the monologue I actually had to Google the person he mentioned to find out what the...
Melvin Dummer?
Yes, man. Yep. Well, let's talk about just in general the guests on this special, because we have quite a number of people making triumphant returns.
A lot of our favorites, yes.
So, Ann-Margret, who's making her first appearance, I believe. I might miss someone because of Night of 100 Stars.
Yeah.
Charo, who of course we did an entire episode about her variety special. Mac Davis, he's new to the show, but certainly he's been on our list to get on here somehow.
Yeah.
Sammy Davis Jr. is making his third appearance. So we had Poor Devil and Night of 100 Stars, and now this.
That's right.
Dean Martin's making his second appearance.
Well, Celebrity Roast, yeah.
I think that's it. Unless he wasn't in Night of 100 Stars.
No, I don't think so.
Kenny Stabler and Fran Tarkington have not shown up, but I wouldn't be surprised if Fran Tarkington does again sometime.
Right.
Muhammad Ali making at least his second appearance. He was in the Wide World of Sports portion of our Evil Knievel / Wide World of Sports episode.
Yes, that's right.
Red Buttons. Is this his third appearance? Is that right?
He must have been in the roast episode.
I'm sure he was in the roast.
And Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July.
Howard Cosell, who, of course, was in Battle of the Network Stars, and, again, that Evil Knievel Wide World of Sports episode.
Mm-hmm.
And Les Brown and his band of renown. We certainly haven't had, but, if we can't get Bobby in the BOTNS orchestra sometime, I say we check out Les Brown and his band of renown.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's and Texaco. Texaco, we could consider them a...
And yes, and
part of the show.
And there's actually another big star who shows up who kind of surprised me. Actually, he does not. Sorry, I was thinking of another one I'd watched, of something else I'd watched.
Can you tell me who it was?
It was Fred Berry. I was just watching him in the Doris Day special, where him and Tony Basil and the Lockers dance group were in.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking, no, this was Mac Davis. This was the Struts.
The Struts.
Yeah. I do think it speaks to a couple of things. It speaks to Bob Hope and just sort of that essential show business aspect of him and his specials that I mentioned. That he's got all these like kind of reliables that we've had in other episodes of the podcast. And also Bob Hope himself used a lot of like recurring guests, and like Cosell was in a bunch of his specials. Ann-Margret would show up, just people he was comfortable with. Sammy Davis Jr. was in multiple Bob Hope specials. And then later into the 1980s, it would seem like, Brooke Shields and Lonnie Anderson would be in just about every one he'd do. So he liked working with people that could go with the system of how they did things and would fit in with the production. And once, again, kind of showing that loyalty, once somebody worked out for them, he would have them back again.
And it does seem like Ann-Margret in particular just seems like someone who, this must have been a huge part of her career, doing these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I mean, like most of my knowledge of Ann-Margret comes from commercials for her performing in Atlanta in the summer.
Oh, really?
I've seen a few movies she's been in and stuff, but I didn't watch it, but on YouTube I saw a link for a CBS Sunday morning clip from very recently with the incomparable Ann-Margret. So I guess she's still out there doing stuff.
Good for her.
Yeah. So I keep wanting to call this special, by the way, Bob Hope's All-Star Comedy Caper.
Yeah.
But
understandable.
So when did it air, and what against? The people want to know.
Yes, it premiered January 21st, 1977 on NBC, as we mentioned, and it was preceded by Sanford and Son at 8 o'clock, then Bob Hope at 8:30, and this was a 90-minute special, so it aired from 8:30 to 10, and then it was followed at 10 by an episode of The Rockford Files, another BOTNS favorite.
Can I ask you about that? Because didn't the clip say that Chico and the Man and Rockford Files would be delayed?
It did.
But that's not what happened.
I'm not sure. I think it's. I was wondering about that. It's possible that this clip was from a rebroadcast, or something else happened. So I'll look into that. But according to my records, looking at listings, that's what aired this night. But I did see and appreciate that card at the beginning, because I love those preemption things.
So what else would it air against?
CBS had kind of an oddball lineup of the premiere of a show called Code R, which was kind of like a paramedic emergency show set like in a small town, or like an island small town. Didn't last. Then an episode of Sonny and Cher that had Flip Wilson, old reliable Ken Berry, and Betty White as their guests. And at 10 o'clock, Executive Suite, which is a primetime soap just before Dallas that did not last again. So kind of a weeknight on CBS on this Friday night. And ABC had Donnie and Marie show at 8 o'clock with guest stars including Paul Lynde and the Brady Bunch. So that's a big one. And one of the early TV movies of The Love Boat at 9 o'clock. So I believe the second one. And I'm not sure how it ties in with the multiple versions of the Love Boat pilots and everything, but I think it was the Love Boat 2. So a TV movie with the Love Boat at 9 o'clock, closing it out for ABC.
Okay, well, I feel like Bob Hope might have been the best choice at night.
Yeah.
But a lot of literal variety shows on there. So
that's for sure, yeah.
Get your fill. A little Donnie and Marie, a little Bob Hope, a little Sonny and Cher.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of probably at the tail end of the variety show craze, I think. I think by this point it was probably starting to go downhill. So kind of maybe the last gasp of everybody having a variety show that kind of era.
And then, think about it, specials like Bob Hope specials kind of kept that format alive in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
So this special, before we get into the opening credits, has a little teaser. So a running theme, I guess, of all the sketches, or most of the sketches, is the Tacky Film Festival. And we get a bunch of really short hits of Lake Tahoe themed parodies of other films. So there's Tahoe, Son of Cochise, in which Bob Hope plays Tahoe, who sends a drum signal to Geronimo, who then has an answering machine. And there's a Robin Hood of Tahoe Forest, Gone with the Tahoe, which includes Charo and Ann-Margret's in a few of these, and then the Arnold Tahoe story, which is an excuse for a Gerald Ford joke, and then Last Tango in Tahoe, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with Last Tango in Paris, but they're kind of a quick hit, and I don't know how you felt about them. I was probably done after the second one.
Yeah, I mean, just I think the Wesley Hyatt book, which reviews each special that he was able to access, it said something like, and he was very high on the show overall. I think he gave it 4 stars out of 5, and which is actually not that common. I mean, it's more common that they get 3 stars or something. So he's not like gushing over all these specials. But anyways, he says something like, "Those who find the titles funny will probably find the sketches funny." It's a real stretch. I mean, the Arnold Tahoe story, I mean, come on. Although, I actually did like that joke. Even then, probably, jokes about Gerald Ford being a bad golfer and clumsy were had been done to death. But I actually thought that worked better than most of the other ones, which are just kind of like maybe an excuse for a cheap sight gag or getting Bob Hope in a costume, which is something he apparently loved doing.
Right. And then we get the opening credits with all the people we already mentioned, and then Bob doing his monologue, which I didn't really write down any of these jokes or anything, but of course this aired, as Rick said, January 21st, so the day after the inauguration of Jimmy Carter. So there are a lot of Jimmy Carter jokes and a lot of "it's cold in Tahoe" jokes, the fresh air compared to the smog in LA jokes. But interesting to watch him do this, and kind of the editing seems a little choppy sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I know we were talking before about like his various looks when he's waiting for the laugh to end.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's a smirk. Sometimes it's just like the dead stare.
Yes. Like
there's 2 versions. There's one where like the punchline, it's sort of like a negative thing. So he's kind of making a face. I'm trying to think of an example of that, but where it like the joke starts out up and then ends with a some sort of negative thing happening.
Like a self-mocking joke, which he doesn't say on this, but like a joke about him not winning any Oscars or something like that.
Yeah. But then others, he's just like staring.
Yeah. Like sometimes there's a fine line between deadpan and dead stare.
And the Carter jokes are not political at all. They're just like peanut jokes and Billy Carter jokes and things.
Jokes about the South.
Yes, yeah. Which, is typical of the time.
And that's again another thing that Bob Mills talks about is the monologue was very important to Bob Hope, but also very important to tie things into the local area where they were doing the special. So that would be the big assignment is, okay, come up with a lot of material. And actually, the writers that wrote the TV specials were Bob Hope's writers for the live gigs too. So a lot of times, like at the last minute, they'd get requests for, I need something on so-and-so, or maybe like something big would happen, like something would happen to the mayor or something, or some incident would happen, and he'd literally call them up and say, "Hey, I need something on this event that just happened." They'd come up with a joke and tell it to him so that he could incorporate it into his routine. So the monologue was very important to him, and he loved tying it into the local flavor, and why not? That otherwise, why do it?
Right, but it is interesting to do it on a national TV special, where presumably most people had not been to Lake Tahoe.
Yeah.
And you get like 2 minutes of Lake Tahoe jokes.
Yeah, and we're about to get our first real Texaco spot, and I kind of mentioned earlier that Texaco became their sponsor in 1974. And one thing I found interesting was they were the ones that requested him to kind of revamp his writing staff, do more themed shows, and they tried to get him to do a variety of producers, and that failed. They had a period where there were multiple producers, and then eventually Bob just had his daughter Linda become like the regular producer and kind of a proxy for him. But I think Texaco was also one that encouraged him to get out on the road and not do as many shows in Burbank, but just do more things like getting out to locales and kind of doing things because they thought like, even though they were getting good ratings, that they thought the specials were getting a little stale, and they wanted that was the amount of control they exercised, was encouraging them to do more theme shows, more getting out of the studio and doing more shows on the road, so we get things like, Bob doing a show in Tahoe like this.
Yeah, they also encouraged him to get more regular maintenance on himself.
Yes.
At his local independently owned Texaco station.
Correct.
Yeah, in that first, it's funny because when the first Texaco thing started, I thought it was going to be a sketch, but then it turned out to be I get the impression that a lot of these Texaco things were coming out of the first gas crisis sort of PR things.
Yes.
Like trying to remind people that oil wasn't bad. So in this case, it's about who owns the oil companies, and it's people just like you and me. It's the stockholders, and not just Texaco, but all the oil companies, regular Americans just like us.
Yeah, and we watched a version online that has these original Texaco spots embedded in it. And when I saw this for the first time and saw that, I was like, wow, that's a really positive image they're putting out there. But it got even more positive as the show went on, which is funny.
And then we come back from that, and Sammy Davis Jr. sings "What I Did for Love." And that's nice. We've already praised Sammy's performance abilities before.
Yes. I'm no expert on a chorus line, but I believe this song was made famous in that production.
Oh, so that's 2 songs from a chorus line in this, at least.
Yes, and I don't think it was quite as upbeat in this one, or in the original production, but who am I to argue with Sammy Davis Jr., the consummate entertainer?
Exactly.
I enjoyed this number. I wasn't familiar with the song, but I liked it.
And that's followed by the first kind of long sketch, which is Ann-Margret and Bob in A Star is Torn, which is a parody of the version of A Star is Born that was out then, starring Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson. I've never seen any version of A Star is Born, but I know the basic gist of it, I guess. But it didn't seem like you had to have seen the movie to understand the sketch, because almost every line explained what was going on.
Right. It's very broadly done, very broadly performed, and again, an excuse to get people into costumes. Bob Hope, I guess, is Chris Christopherson, and Ann-Margret was rather foxy in this sketch, I must say.
And I thought, again, I haven't seen that movie, but she seemed to be doing a passable Barbra Streisand impression.
Yeah.
Like, she just altered her voice a little bit, and it seemed on. And she had her very teased out wig to match Barbara's hair from that period.
I think she shows, this is a good example of how she commits to the material, and even totally, and by committing to the material, we mean in this style. So going big when necessary, and also not being afraid to mug a little bit, and even, make comments to the audience if need be and stuff. But you can see how she fits in with this Bob Hope comedy style, and why, he would like having her in these. Yeah,
and all throughout this, we can argue about whether this is good or not, but you can kind of see through you can see the performers enjoying performing with each other, being amused by what they're saying.
Right.
Not quite breaking, but almost breaking.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where you sometimes wonder. It's kind of hard to explain. It's
yeah.
It's in other circumstances you might wonder if it's insincere, and I have no doubt that there were times that they sort of built in some of this stuff, and that Bob Hope himself enjoyed just make it look like he was breaking character every now and then. But I think most of the time it was probably genuine, especially when he's interacting with, his friends and stuff. And like you say, it's like that love of performing, I think, most of all, and getting that reaction from the audience, and just kind of being there and doing this, in a show that they really enjoy it.
And it does seem like a kind of a huge audience. It's hard to tell, but
yeah,
when they show those shots, it's a little bit like the roasts, unfortunately, because then it makes me think, oh, this is all a gag too. But there's enough stuff that makes it feel like it's actually in front of that audience.
Right.
It might have been in front of multiple audiences too. It's a TV show, so it's not just a live performance, because they're moving from these sketches and songs and stuff too quickly for that. But
yeah, that reminds me that one thing that Bob Mills talked about several times was that, Bob Hope himself liked to under-rehearse, and he wanted that spontaneity. So he would come out sometimes and warm up a live audience, but he was very protective about the audience not being exposed to what they were going to see, and especially the jokes. If he'd come out, he'd sort of mumble or do nonsense words so that they wouldn't actually hear the jokes, because he wanted their reaction to be the actual reaction. He did not want to lose, quote unquote, waste laughter. So he was very protective about them not seeing as little as possible before they actually went on stage, because it was very important to try to get that laughter the first time or as soon as possible to make it spontaneous, and also to get more laughter and not burn them out on the material.
Well, I can see the under-rehearsed part in some of that looseness again, especially, of course, he does a sketch with Dean Martin. We know didn't rehearse so for his own show, so I'm sure he didn't rehearse for this.
Yeah, and I think another thing I read was that he liked to give the guests the scripts as late as possible, partly for that, but also so that they wouldn't make suggestions. So you can see that would be another reason why he'd have sort of a repertory, or at least repeating people, because it would be people that would trust him and that wouldn't bring up, that wouldn't make life difficult for him, and that would be trusting enough to go in there without having an opportunity to object to a lot of stuff at the last minute.
Yeah. So after that sketch, we get our boy Mac Davis. And Bob makes, for me, one of my favorite jokes of the special, which is Mac won 3 Grammys for his curly hair.
Yes.
So, do you want to tell folks about your Mac Davis merchandise?
Well, I've got a vintage, I think, Slurpee cup of Mac Davis with a beautiful illustration of the man himself on the side of the cup and some facts about him on the back. And I think it was part of a series of like 7-Eleven cups with country music and recording stars on it that came out probably right around this time. I'm not sure offhand. I'll have to look up when it came out, but it's pretty sweet. I have it as a display piece, though. I try not to drink out of it, just to preserve the cup's structural integrity as long as possible, not because I would be embarrassed to drink out of a Mac Davis cup. I would have no problem doing that. And it's a proud thing that I should have in front of me right now, and I'm ashamed to admit that I do not. I should have gotten that out for inspiration.
So, if folks don't know Mac Davis, country singer, songwriter, actor, host of his own variety specials, guest on many variety shows. Ubiquitous figure, I think, in the 70s and 80s.
And a big songwriter, wrote In the Ghetto for Elvis. And
yes, I believe on another episode I mistakenly said he also wrote Suspicious Minds, but we corrected that in the show notes. I think I even made some sort of audio reference to my mistake. But he did write In the Ghetto.
There's no shame in wanting to attribute more songs to Mac Davis, but he wrote plenty of them himself.
Right. Was in North Dallas 40.
Mm-hmm.
Who else was in? Nick Nolte was in that?
Yes, that was Mac Davis and Nick Nolte, yes. Sometimes I confuse that with Semi-Tough, which came out around the same time and was also based on a novel. That was the one with, we won't get into that. That was the one that had Chris Christopherson, I believe.
So, Mac does a song that he wrote called Poor Boy Boogie, and this is, as you mentioned, with the Struts. This is a dancing group. This is pretty fun.
Yeah.
Got some like vocal rhythms, and then there's a bit at the end where all the dancers are standing up on one leg, and he like draws out this line before they can unbalance. And at some point he says, I wrote the song, I can sing it however I want.
Right.
So, that was some good fun. Good to see him.
Yeah, I enjoyed this spot too.
And at that point in the special, which really isn't that deep, but we've already had 2 songs, and other than I guess between the monologue and the opening thing and the sketch, there's been a fair bit of comedy too. But I was starting to question the title of the special a little bit. It seems more like an all-star musical thing with some comedy. I didn't mind because I kind of preferred the music. But
right.
Anyway, then we get to some more Texaco. One is this recommendation to regularly get your car tuned up, get all the plugs and points checked, all that stuff, oil change, your whole deal. And then there's this a second one about how good Haviland motor oil is from Texaco, and that it was used in a bunch of state trooper cars, and they did great. Their engines showed no unusual wear, and they drove lots of miles. Go Texaco.
Yeah, they must be very happy with the results so far. And it is kind of funny seeing just how essentially like oil company propaganda it is, but they're well-made ads. I think they're very well produced, and they don't seem insincere or anything. It's just kind of with context and maybe with an extra 40-some years of cynicism. You might look askance at some of these, but I think for what they're doing, they're very successful. And I don't know if they convinced a lot of like angry people that were upset with oil companies at the time, to totally do a 180, but they might have given kind of more of a more subtle effect, like to have people not be upset with Texaco, or at least kind of think in their minds, well, maybe some of the oil companies are shady, but Texaco is kind of more on our side and they're doing what they can.
I think Texaco, we were like a Texaco family for a while.
Oh, really?
As much as you could be with a gas station. But yeah, I remember having some sort of, this just seems weird, but like a Fisher Price Little People Texaco station. That just seems odd that they would do that.
Yeah.
Some sort of Texaco station anyway. But of course they're gone now, so you can't really be loyal to them.
You would have that kind of thing back then, like corporate branding on toys, like
Yeah.
mobile, or like vans, toy
Yes.
vans and trucks and things like that, with
Yeah,
Exxon.
the Coca-Cola truck too.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is the other problem though. If back in this period, or not now quite as much, but people could be mad at the oil companies, but there's really no choice other than riding a bike instead of having a car.
Yeah. I mean, it would be, exactly. It'd be things like maybe carpooling, but yeah, you're right. There's not much you can really do.
And even here, that they're like recommending things that might, in theory, help you not have to spend as much money on gas and repairs and things. Like if you're getting tune-ups, and that might help your mileage. And I seem to remember like even gas companies like advertise our gas increases your mileage or something.
Right, that was like a big thing.
But we come back from those and we get Dino singing I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face. And it's a nice croony Dino thing. Now there's a thing at the beginning where he comes out. There's a framed picture facing him. It's on a pedestal. And he gets to the end of the song, and I don't know the song well enough to know if it always ended this way, but he said, I've grown accustomed to that face. The whole song's about how this her face and all her qualities have changed him and all of that, and then they cut to a shot over his shoulder and the frame picture of himself.
Yes. A very classic Dean Martin performance. Casual, the cigarette, the piano, and sing like a very serious sentimental song, and then kind of punctuating it with a gag at the end. But, another good moment.
Yeah. And then we have Bob doing, I feel like this is a quintessential Bob Hope special kind of thing, the comedy interview. And in this case, he's talking to Fran Tarkington and Kenny Stabler, but, all the questions are setting them up for punchlines.
Yeah, the writers hated this. They called them talk spots because they thought it was very difficult to mine comedy out of these situations, and they also thought it was awkward and usually some of the stiffest parts of the show, because a lot of times they would be putting in people like the guests who didn't have comedy backgrounds and kind of forcing them into this banter. But Bob Hope insisted on doing them. He thought it was an essential part of the show. And you're right, this is a classic example of that phenomenon. And in this case, I think it worked pretty well.
I mean, we know, of course, Fran Tarkington became a TV personality not long after. So he holds his own. And, it's a little awkward, but I think it works. So I guess the Vikings had lost the Super Bowl that year or the year before?
Yes, I think they had just played Super Bowl 11, and Oakland had won 32-14, so it was pretty lopsided.
And was Stabler with Oakland then?
Yeah, he was the Oakland quarterback, and Fran was the Minnesota quarterback.
Yeah, but, I mean, there was a Mickey Rooney joke, so.
Yeah. And, the whole thing it is kind of awkward, but in that sort of amiable, kind of harmless way. It's like, okay, we got athletes out here, they're being good sports.
Yeah.
I think Fran Tarkington, maybe is a little bit of hindsight here, but I thought he was particularly good at doing this. And not like a comedy genius or anything, but you could kind of see how, it's easy to understand how he got into television because he seems very comfortable here.
Right, and not just like sports television.
Right.
And then Ann-Margret does a version of All By Myself that, it was okay.
Well,
it seemed to, and I don't know if this is an issue with her range or what, it's a slightly different arrangement. And so the part, the All By Myself part where you expect to be really big is only like kind of big. And the phrasing of it is a little different.
I'd agree. Yet for somehow her performance seemed even more melodramatic than the original to me. I don't know. I didn't. I was a little disappointed, but I didn't care for this as much as the next number with her. It was. We are seeing though the Mac Davis that we've numbers so far is the most like quote unquote rock that we've gotten. I mean, but it does show a little bit of variety within musical styles here. But I think this is the least successful number so far, definitely. But it's a little bit different in its own way, and it's an effort to get some contemporary music. Kind of with the Mac Davis too. But the Dean Martin song was what, like, 15, at least 15 years old at that time. I guess the Sammy Davis was more contemporary too, but it was kind of a Broadway kind of thing. And this is a popular song that was on the charts in that era. So at least getting things a little bit more contemporary. And I guess this is what passed for hip in a 1977 Bob Hope special, maybe.
And then we get a couple more Texaco things. And the first one, maybe this is the height of their PR push. I'm not sure. But they talk about how they don't really make money from gas.
Oh, I love this one. This is my favorite in the whole special. Yes, this was brilliant.
So they're asking supposed customers how much money they think Texaco makes from a gallon of gas. and it's like 30 cents, 10 cents. Now, I don't know what a gallon of gas was in 1977. I suppose I could Google that. I know in the 90s it was still like $1 a gallon. So.
Yeah.
But I feel like their guesses are pretty good, and according to them, it's like what, 1.25 cent.
Yes.
Now, how did you take? I guess I had to think about it later. I'm like, because then like most of it goes into like looking for drilling for oil and all that, making sure there is oil. So I guess they're saying that that's the profit that they make, and the rest of the money that they make goes back into the business.
Yeah.
Not that the gas station's making the other 45 cents or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think they were being a little vague about it, deliberately so.
Because I know now whenever we have gas prices going up, one of the things you hear is that the gas stations don't actually make any money from the gas. It's everything else. That's why they have convenience stores. That's the thing that makes them the money. The gas gets you in, but so I was like, wait, they're only making 1.25 cents. Then who's making everything else?
Yeah, where's the rest of the money going?
Yeah, so.
And this is the 70s, and you got inflation and accusations of like price gouging at the gas station level when there were gas shortages. So I can see why they want to put this out there.
Yeah. And then there's another one that Bob is in talking about how you don't have to be a star to get star treatment at Texaco, and more maintenance and all that, and everything they do with their Havalan oil and their various brands of gasoline.
Bob's wearing what, like as a houndstooth hat. Kind of in a lot of these ads, it's kind of like his, Citizen Bob kind of guys, going around and driving or being driven, and I kind of like that.
I mean, this one sort of like it was like a movie set too, right?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't he in a direct, like on a crane or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then we come back and Bob and Ann-Margret do the other song from A Chorus Line 1, and that's very nice. They make a good duet team and do a little bit of dancing.
Right. Yeah. It's a charming little number, I would say.
Yeah. And speaking of charming little numbers, the next movie parody, Son of Rocky, stars Bob as Rocky, Sammy as his opponent Colossus, Ann-Margret as his girl Angie, and Howard Cosell, plus a cameo at the end. So Sammy's the champ, Rocky's the challenger, or son of whatever, and they're playing it to the hilt here.
They sure are. This is the kind of sketch, like, if you can enjoy this on any level, then you'll enjoy the special. But if not, I can see why, you just think that the whole thing's corny and dated. Like, a lot of the humor about Ann-Margret's character, is the fact that she's not good looking, and she's got, like, a prosthetic nose she's wearing as, part of the character's costume. And
yeah, some of that stuff, I mean, is very silly and broad, but like Sammy, he has a couple people bring him in on a throne, and he's wearing all gold lame, and then Bob comes in and he's got like this robe with enormous shoulder pads and very terrible wig, like intentionally terrible, I think.
Right. And
then when he takes his robe off, and of course he's his regular size, and he's a little overweight at this point, paunchy, and he's got like some chest hair glued to his chest. And then, of course, he's much bigger than Sammy, but Sammy shows how good he is by knocking out both of the guys that brought him in, and Bob is playing the coward.
Yes.
He pulls off Ann-Margret's nose. Like, oh, hey, you aren't that bad looking. And there's like a weird thing about like how she's been in his trunk since 1971 or something. And
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I want to point out, too, that this is airing in January 1977, and Rocky's huge. It hadn't won the Best Picture yet, but it would be the Best Picture that was released in 1976. It was kind of the smash movie of the year, so it was very timely of them to be spoofing the movie, even in a very loose way.
Right. And credit where credit's due. Howard Cosell does an excellent Howard Cosell.
He certainly does.
Yes. I mean, the writing is like a good parody of Howard Cosell. He embraces it.
He does. And Sammy Davis Jr., I think, is very good.
And then right when they're about to fight, Muhammad Ali storms on stage and plugs one, insults their acting, and two, plugs his upcoming movie, his autobiographical movie.
An interesting thing from the Laugh Makers book was that I guess Bob Hope allowed guests to plug at will, according to Bob Mills, is how he put it. He said, as long as it got a laugh. So if it was like in the service of a joke, and in this case, this is a good example. I mean, Muhammad Ali is kind of making fun of their acting and saying he's going to save Hollywood, but Bob Hope was obsessed with plugging his own material himself when he went on other shows, so he had no problem with guests coming on just to plug something, as long as it ended up in theory at least, a laugh.
That's very magnanimous of him. And I sort of laughed. I mean, again, it's like the Ali thing. He's just so darned charismatic.
He is, and I was kind of trying to make the timeline, and it actually looked like he, at this point, unfortunately, he was probably slowing down a little bit. I don't want to judge him on this one appearance, but, he wasn't quite in his athletic prime at this point. He was kind of on the decline, but it was cool. It would have been the kind of thing that would have been great probably if it had been a total surprise. If it came out like that, it would have been a real awesome way to end the sketch.
Right, instead of them having it in the opening credits.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even then, it might have been a surprise. If I guess, like, for me, it wasn't a surprise because we had picked this episode and it kind of gone down the list of guests and everything. But I guess in theory, if you're sitting and you're like halfway through the show or whatever, you might have forgotten that they mentioned Ali at the beginning, and maybe it'd be a little bit easier to be legitimately surprised. But it would have been a nice uncredited surprise. But again, this is probably a decision like, hey, if Muhammad Ali's going to be in your special, you're going to promote that because at the time he's one of the most famous athletes in the world.
Right. And after that, Charo does a version of the ABBA song Fernando, and I don't know that song really well, but I thought she did a good job. She was very earnest.
Yeah, she was.
The way they staged it and everything, she is playing her guitar, but I don't think you can really hear it, especially since it's not really mic'd, and the orchestra is kind of loud, and she's not doing, all her usual, like, intense stuff anyway, but so it's more focused on the singing. But it's nice. I liked it. And then she and Bob have a typical conversation with Charo.
Yeah.
But she's so enthusiastic, and it seems, I don't know, I mean, it's always that question with her, where does the act end, and where...
Yeah.
But I think she seems really happy to be on that special, because in another sketch later, her reactions seem real when they don't need to be.
Yeah. Well, much like Cosell, she's good at being herself.
Yes.
She's playing that role, and she's... Yeah, she brings a lot to this.
And then we get a couple more Texaco things. One, using the tortoise and the hare as a metaphor for not taking care of your car. So the tortoise obviously is the one that takes care of it. And then one, saying follow the leader. And it has the state troopers again and just, saying Texaco's the leader. And so you should use Texaco products from your local independently owned Texaco franchise. And then we come back and Bob does a little comedy interview with Mac. I don't remember anything specific from that other than Mac being amiable.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything particularly distinctive about it, about specific lines, but it was also a good showcase for what a versatile performer Mac Davis is, that he could hold his own on stage and seem credible up there with him.
Yeah, and then he performs a song called Every Now and Then, a ballad, right? And that was nice too.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And then Bob and Sammy are reporters covering the inaugural ball, and it's really just them sitting on stage. But Bob is playing noted journalist and hairdresser to Tom Snyder, Sandra Van Johnson. And Sammy is Nancy Dickerson.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but...
No. And then, it's a bunch of, again, Peanut jokes and Billy Carter jokes.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a lot of effort went into this one. I don't think that really... Like you said, there was no... I don't even think there was a backdrop. There wasn't any effort to put them on a set. Not much in the way of props. So, yeah, it was a little weak.
Yeah. One of the jokes was, there's a Jell-O mold that looks like Billy Carter. And I just well, no, it's going to be Billy Carter. And of course it was. But
right.
That's the speed of what's going on there. And then you get Bob and Dino in another movie parody, The Road to Tahoe. So Dino's playing Louis Brave, and Bob is playing Clark Krusty. And they're on the road to Lake Tahoe. And so it's a parody of the road movies with Bing Crosby a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, road movies, which I really enjoyed. And I mean, one of my takeaways is this sketch is really just an excuse for an assortment of jokes. But then again, you could say that about the road movies in some ways, which they're great movies, but they would be kind of loosely plotted and a lot of addressing the camera, breaking the fourth wall, and kind of things like that, and just kind of relying on the chemistry between the two. So, as a reflection of that, I think this works really well.
Yeah, and I think they get a lot of mileage out of maybe the stuff that's not quite working the way it should. Mm-hmm. Like the fake snow machine seems a little out of control, especially on Dean's side.
Yeah.
And he's sputtering a lot and stuff. And so the real gag at the end, which I definitely enjoyed, was so Charo shows up and they're both, Bob's hitting on her, and then Dino puts on a hat and gets out a pipe and starts talking like Bing Crosby. And of course wins her and walks off.
Yep, another L for Bob Hope.
Yep.
In a road picture, but yeah, I thought that was a good way to end the sketch.
Bing Crosby was one of Dean Martin's idols, right? So
yeah,
I'm sure that was fun for him.
Yeah, and Charo coming out and taking the Dorothy Lamour role, well, just showing up in a sarong, I guess, and Yeah, it was. I like this sketch. This is one of my favorite pieces of business on the whole special.
Then we get a couple more Texaco things. One is Bob visiting all sorts of oil drilling sites, hitting a golf ball off an oil rig, and that's that George Costanza then had to remove from a whale. And then there's one, that your local independently owned Texacos are having a save on oil changes promotion. I don't know how much we're going to save, but it's enough that this guy's getting an oil change, even though you might not need one right then.
Well, I have a feeling that oil changes were probably always pretty expensive.
Yes.
Or at least always something that people would complain about what they were paying for it.
The price, and they don't get into it, but a hassle.
Yeah.
And hey, if somebody's willing to give you an oil change right then and there, maybe that would be more incentive to me.
Yeah, it'd be tempting to take them up on it.
If I had time, oh yeah, we can do this in 15 minutes, and it's on sale. I just got one last week, but
yeah, even so,
stock them up, I guess.
Right.
And then we come back and Bob and Sammy do a little soft shoot.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's typical, and something that I've seen them do in other specials. But it's fine. Yeah, it works.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a master dancer and Bob Hope.
Yes.
No, he had a reputation for being a dancer and vaudeville.
That's right. He started as a hoofer himself, so he's a hoofer from way back.
Yes, and then this is probably my favorite sketch, the Bob Hope roast of King Kong. Yeah, with Charo and Red Buttons.
Of course. Yes.
And Bob's the host, so he does a few jokes, and there's this is when the new King Kong movie was out, the one with Charles Grodin and others. No.
Yeah.
Charles Grodin and Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange. But there's big legs behind him, and King Kong's growling every now and then.
And Charo's like laughing, like for real laughing. She seemed really into this.
Yeah.
But then Red Buttons, he's really laying into laughing, fake laughing like they did or seemed to do on the real roast.
Yeah, there's a good reaction shot of Bob laughing, something though that I thought could have gone either way, but it looked like something you'd see on one of the Dean Martin specials for sure.
And Red does his never got a dinner bit.
Yeah, with animals that never got a dinner.
Right.
So it was a nice variation on the bit.
Yeah.
This is a good one. I enjoyed this too.
It certainly felt more actually live than the real roast would. And the whole thing did. I mean, I don't know if all these celebrities are there at the same time, but it felt together.
I think you're right, yeah. It just seems like the way that as tight a ship as Bob Hope liked to run, that they would probably try to do things live to tape as much as possible, I think. And with reaction shots and everything, of course.
And then the show ends with a nice monologue that Bob gives, a serious monologue about the sort of handover of power to a new president. And not to make it too much about now, but it feels sort of quaint given the way things are lately. And he has a lot of, no pun intended, I guess, hope for the future.
Yeah, like with the problems that we all face. And he praised, he used the phrase, the exchange of powers, which it did seem have a little extra meaning, but he talked about how, they had spent, a couple of months, arguing and fighting and making fun of each other. And now it was, time to see what the new administration would do. And he'd start off praising Tahoe, which was generous of him, but he praises America, at the end. And it really seems sincere.
And then right before the end credits, we get another reminder to visit your local independently owned Texaco franchise for all your gas and car maintenance needs. And at Texaco, we're working to keep your trust.
And I was fascinated by that Texaco messaging was an element that I wasn't really expecting, because I didn't know the presentation of this video, which was actually pretty good quality for seeing it online, a 45-year-old special. But I was really glad to see the Texaco ads. They put things in context, and even more so than a lot of the material, it seemed like they really kind of rooted this in its era with this oil company messaging. But yeah, I liked it, and also showed how Bob Hope, another thing he would commit to was his sponsor, and he would go all in and make appearances for them and participate in the advertising. So yeah, he was all aboard for it.
Can't imagine today someone of Bob Hope's stature, or really any celebrity, doing this kind of advertising for an oil company.
No. Maybe you would get like a respected actor or something to do like a tasteful voiceover. But as far as somebody like actually, hitting golf balls off oil derricks, and just this amount of outright association with. Yeah, it really seems kind of odd and modern eyes. For years, I think it was Chevy, like Chevrolet, that sponsored Bob Hope, and he was really associated with, or no, I'm sorry, Chrysler. It was Chrysler was the big thing. Maybe Chevy before that, but for years, like I think in the 60s, a lot of it was the Chrysler company. So you don't kind of get that, for better or for worse, but it's interesting to see. And even at this time, that kind of thing was on the decline.
I'm glad we got to do this. Now, I can't say that I loved all the comedy, but I liked a lot of the music, and I just, like with a lot of stuff we do, I liked the nostalgia factor of it, revisiting old Bob and these specials.
Yeah, I'm glad. And, Lori, she wasn't really interested in watching Bob Hope. She finds him creepy.
Oh.
And maybe a lot of people that kind of grew up in our era and were mostly exposed to him, not even thinking anything about, off camera or anything, but just seeing him as an old man, like in the 80s and 90s even. Maybe they would have that feeling, but, I sort of watched some of the old movies and sort of just... Even, I think, around the time we were growing up, I saw him just kind of more as this big entertainer, showbiz guy, and thinking of him sort of appearances like the Muppet movie is a good example. I kind of took like a broader view and just saw him as, okay, this classic showbiz performer. And today, I still appreciate on that level, even when the comedy doesn't always work. I still enjoy watching the show and seeing that style. I enjoy it, and seeing, like, especially when you see the caliber of performer that was in this special, it works for me, even when it's not hitting it out of the park with the punchlines and everything. I just like the way it all comes together. And as far as like monologues with the topical humor goes, you had Johnny Carson at the time, but not a whole lot else. I mean, maybe you'd have like Dick Cavett and some off and on competition over the years, but not nearly what you have today, where everybody has a take on everything that's going on. And I can't even imagine trying to come up with fresh reactions to things at the end of the day now that'll be on when you've got maybe 5 or 6 just shows on the networks doing this kind of stuff. So it was a little bit more distinctive. So he had sort of had that advantage, but he did work hard. And, another thing that Bob Mills says is that he was actually pretty good with the writers. He had some quirks, but he didn't really see himself as a rewriter. So once he approved a joke, he would stick with it. He saw himself as an editor. So he thought that his talent was in choosing what jokes worked best for him, not necessarily in taking jokes and tinkering with them. But he thought that he was an editor and kind of like an overseer of the process, and that was his big talent. And then, of course, going out and delivering the jokes.
We'll offer this critique beyond what I've already said about maybe some of the jokes not working. Not enough Mac.
That's true. Not enough Mac. And really kind of in that sweet spot era of what we cover is inundated with variety shows and specials of all types. The kind of thing that we often lament that just isn't on TV anymore. Not even just like this, specials centered around a comedian, but just all kinds of entertainment specials in general. So we got some literal variety in this season already. And Mike, I think we're going to have a lot of candidates for outstanding song at the Baddies. Not to look too far ahead, but there's going to be some tough choices.
You're right. I mean, between Maude and the Easter special and this, I don't know, but that's like a couple dozen songs.
Yes.
The Blue Ribbon nominating panel committee is going to have a lot of pressure on them.
Yeah. We're the ones that have the pressure of determining it live on the air.
That's true. And if you have thoughts on variety shows, Bob Hope, what song should be nominated for the Baddies, you can join our Facebook group at Facebook. Just search for Battle of the Network Shows and you'll find our page and our group. Answer a few questions and you can join the discussion.
That's right.
And also you could leave a comment on our website, battleofthenetworkshows.com, or drop us an email at mailbag@battleofthenetworkshows.com. And you could also help us out a little bit. We've got a TeePublic store. Got some cool t-shirts or whatever. Many, many things you can get our logo or our mascot or caricatures on. Just go to TeePublic, search for us, or you can find a link at our website. That might be the quickest way to get there. And one last thought. Remember, get regular maintenance on your car, please.
I echo that sincere and heartfelt plea from Mike. If there's anything you take away from this episode of Battle of the Network Shows, let it be that great message that he just gave you. This episode brought to you by Public Relations. This episode also brought to you by the Greater Lake Tahoe Tourist Board. It may be cold here, but we've got clean air. Ooh. This episode also brought to you by Texaco. We don't really exist anymore, but if we did, we'd remind you to perform regular maintenance on your vehicle at your local independently owned Texaco station. Tell them Bob sent you. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.